Our last but one session for the evening is by Isha Chaudhari from IIT Gandhinagar, who's here to talk to us about building global digital identity standards ecosystems.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here with me almost at the end of 2 wonderful days. I understand energies are low, but I'll try to keep it short. In the last 36 hours, we have all but established that digital identity is the bedrock of modern economic society. It is the invisible scaffolding that's behind trade, remittance, and credit. Today, allow me to make the case that there's a need for all of us to come together and create standards for digital identity. I'd like to start the conversation by saying, why should we come together to create standards? It is that in today's ecosystem, we have standards coming from industry consortiums, from government initiatives, and from technical bodies. They work in silos, they exist, but they don't answer for the whole of ecosystem approach. This siloed creation leads to multiple gaps. There are gaps of governance gap, of economic gap, of technical gap. Governance gap is who writes the rule and who's missing from the table. Economic gap is sometimes a compliance cost is just dwarfs the value of following those credentials. What my argument or our argument here today is that there's a need for us to create identity standards together in the global south that factors in the use cases and realities of the global south. It's also essential that sovereign identity is governed and regulated by identity agencies of every country, that they are part of the conversation for creating standards in the identity space. Hopefully, the presentation shows you that we could be able to solve for vendor lock-in, growth, as well as ensuring strategic autonomy of every country. But let me also answer, I think, the more prevalent question today is why do we really need to create standards? Today morning, we heard from Mr. Pramod Verma who spoke about the flywheels effect of credentials. Let me talk to you about the flywheel effect of standards. Standards unlock interoperability. It creates technical compatibility which was previously incompatible systems. What does that help us with? Once these systems are connected, network effect kicks in. Each additional participant makes the network more valuable for everyone, and that allows for scale. That is stage 2. What does scale help us do? Scale help us understand what are the new use cases and new businesses that could possibly come from these standards. It helps with innovation. And stage 4 is what I like to call the improvement loop. We've created standards, we've understood use cases, we've also scaled them, we can improve them again. This is a virtuous cycle that standards lead to. It also leads to solving the chicken and egg problem. Sometimes businesses don't want to enter areas that don't have a standard customer base. Customers don't want to enter because there are no businesses. We create standards, we already provide for a base layer regulation. And therefore, it's my case that standards would be important within the digital identity system. I was intending to not really speak on this slide and let it speak for itself, but I would like to quote Madam Rosemary from yesterday, who mentioned that even though it's 16.9 that says that we need digital identity, there are multiple other SDGs that are dependent on digital identity. I could create a domino effect for you today that identity reduces the cost of trust. Poverty is directly mappable to the cost of trust, but I'll let that be for a different day and maybe for a coffee after. So what is the standardization focus that if we were to create standards for digital identity, we should have in the first go? It is our recommendation that maybe we should start with sovereign identity systems and identity chains. It should be done across data models, consent privacy, as well as exchange protocol. Just to not preach to the choir, what would standardizing sovereign identity systems actually mean? For us, it means that we need to solve for standards of trust and levels of assurances so that different sovereign identity systems are able to talk to each other as equals. This, for me, is one of the most interesting slides to have. We should standardize identity chains. Why? Here, there are 3 examples of what standardization can be. The first, revocation cascade. As of today, no technology, no law, no policy, no regulation exists for it. What would it mean? It would mean that once your foundational identity has been amended, it would affect derivative credentials based on that amendment. How would that work? Imagine there's a death. you report on your foundational identity, all your functional identities related to your foundational identity already account for it. It is something that we can think of creating together. The second is credential transfer. Here I know that the tech exists, but the policy is few and far between. The third is consent management. Here, laws and policies exist, but there's no standard implementation protocols. What I'm trying to show you together is that there are spaces where gaps exist. Gaps exist by neither policy or text being existing there. Gaps exist by either one or the two of the following. Here, we've been working with also the MOSIP team to understand exactly what gaps they've been seeing on field with technical standardization. I'd like to invite a member of the MOSIP team, Vishwa, to speak about what technical gaps they've seen.
Hi everyone, good evening. So yesterday I was having an interesting conversation with Isha on the standards and the gap exist. So I thought I'll do a quick 5 minutes discussion or points on what kind of standard works, related works MOSIP is doing and what are all the gaps that we are identifying. To begin with, we are working on a standard called Claim 169. It's a standard we are working and it is published in IANA. So the area here is, we are working with multiple countries where the internet is not everywhere, and we are also working with landlocked countries where people have to move around, and the people who are moving from one country to another in the border area, they would like to check whether they are from that national. So there is a high assurance need for verification of the individuals where internet is not available. So there is an opportunity to put a QR code and do a face-based verification. But what we have seen so far is that there is no proper standard which was helping us in that place. So we started this standard as a working group. We had people from UNHCR, people from various other organizations coming out with us as a working group, and we were able to come up with a claim called Claim 169. This allows the photo to be compressed and with the data information to be included into one single QR code which can be printed on a paper, which can be very easily scanned, and they can actually verify the people with the highest order of assurance. So this is one activity we are involved in. So we are also involved in one more standard called OpenID for BLE. So this is also a case where to facilitate places where internet is not very widely available. So this is an OpenID protocol which is used for smartphones, but it is over online. But we had special requests or cases from countries where it has to work without online. So over a BLE, there is an extension to an existing protocol was required. So that is also something that our team was working with OpenID team, and we have created a standard out of that. So there is one more new standard that we are currently working on, so that the work has just started. It's called NISP, National Identity Security Profile. So this is more like a profile for national ID comparing the FAPI. So there is a standard called FAPI for online authentications in the banking environments. So, but there was nothing for national identity. So that was an area where we felt that our learnings from the countries can be actually put in and create a new standard. So the idea of me coming here and talking to is the gap exists. We are seeing gaps, and the new gaps are also there. So there are some gaps she has listed. Let's say registration packet format. So this is something we have recently seen. We were working with a different partner who was creating a registration client for a health application. So there was an area where we want to contribute with them, which will do the collaboration work. But if there was a standard for this registration packet structure, the integration between that kind of a rich client, which is used for a health domain, in MOSIP kind of use case and vice versa, would have been possible. So that is also a clear area we are seeing that standards are missing. So standards there will really help. Yeah. So we have more items listed here on the privacy preserving verification also, which is also need of the hour. So the idea that I thought I'll came in and tell that gap do exist, and we are working with various standard organizations. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishwa. I feel like to somewhere we've made a case, hopefully, that there's a need for standards and there's a need for us to come together and create standards together. But also to understand how those standards help. How will there be interoperability basis these standards? I have a few cases to share with you. It'll allow for movement of people and commerce. Now, the use cases in front of you might be familiar to some of you, might not be familiar to some of you. Say, there's a need for work permit. You're traveling across 2 different jurisdictions. At this point, if you require a work permit, you might require somewhere around 2 to 3 months, depending on the jurisdiction you're going to, if not 6 months. In the event, digital identities are interoperable, they could speak to each other. People can get authenticated for working across different jurisdictions in a matter of days, if not hours. Similarly for commerce, if you wanted to, say, hire a vendor or sitting in a different country back in India, but you don't know who the vendor is, how do you verify the vendor? Having interoperable standards between these countries will allow for ease of authentication because sovereign entities may be able to speak to each other. Here I understand, as I mentioned before, that some of you already know that this is possible, but for some, they're not. And that's what I want to bring to you. That the cases are very, very close to reality because of technical capabilities existing. But for us to reach critical mass, we require standards. Network effects require critical mass. And for us, it is that if we were to reach those critical mass, we'd also reduce this cost. I'm just keeping on rolling out, giving out benefits for standardization, but that is the aim today. What is our proposal? Our proposal is that we go ahead and create a digital identity standard alliance, and we do it together. What is the purpose of creating a DISA is that it will be a first effort led by country practitioners from the Global South. It would work on practical, sovereign-aligned identity standards that solve real implementation challenges, challenges that are unique to the Global South in use cases. The scope is something that we've already discussed today before, but the approach would be complementary and not duplicate. Because I'm going to be the devil's advocate here. I already know you're going to say some things exist. But we could add to those efforts, and we could work with them. What are the foundation principles of creating digital identity standards alliance is that strategic autonomy is crucial. Sovereign identity is sovereign, and it requires nations to lead adoption path and nations to control how their identity is used. It has to be an open, inclusive governance. Everyone who's affected by these standards should be part of the governance of creating these standards. They should allow for cross-border interoperability, and it should allow for vendor neutrality. Who can join DISA? Well, DISA can be joined by almost all ecosystem players for the reason that ecosystem players together build digital identity as we know it today. They also help with innovation that we know today. We do have a proposed organizational structure for DISA. It would be that the alliance of members is supported by a secretariat, which would be a non-profit organization to help with administrative tasks and seamless operations. We understand standard organizations require efforts in funding, administrative leave, and therefore we create a non-profit for it. Before you is a tentative structure for what it should look like. The alliance will have a TSO council, it will have a steering committee, it'll have working groups on different agendas and technical council. The secretariat would have a board of directors, which would also include members from the alliance, as well as an executive council to help with operational and administrative tasks. Now, it has been really nice to give you this presentation for the last 15 minutes, but the North Star for today was not to ask everyone to create standards as of right now, but to understand whether you'll be interested in being part of an alliance like such. The need is that standards need to be created collectively by all of us together. And for us to start this conversation, I would love for you to please scan this QR code, take 90 seconds, if not 60, and tell us your feedback, whether you'll be interested in participating in such an alliance in the future. Thank you so much for being with me. Please, there's also my contact, as well as the contact of the proposed organization. Reach out if you just want to have a chat, see what we can do together, and whether you're just interested to know what we are doing right now. Thank you.